All right, I think we're live now. Thank you everybody for joining us, especially if you're online. I think we have a bigger audience online today. We're back for Bagels and Business today, so welcome here at the mill. And we're trying to get more people coming. So if you're watching online and you've been curious to come check out the mill, please do come check it out. We've got bagels here and lots of good conversation. So I would like to introduce our guest today. We're going to be learning about improving business performance. I love this phrase, getting more done with less stress. It's about managing yourself as well as your business processes. And so I'd like to introduce Jim Broussard.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming online and watching. I'm seated because I've got a back issue that I've had for a long time. If not for the power of modern medicine, I'd be in a wheelchair right now. So thank you for attending. I want to talk about two distinct but very related topics. Improving your own personal improvement. A little bit about my background in that area. Most of my career was spent in corporate America, but in 1989, I got tired of working for the man, and motivated by the loss of my job, I decided to go into business for myself. And I had never really even considered it at that point, and I didn't have any great ideas. So how does a person go about going into business for themselves quickly and hopefully successfully without having the background and the knowledge to do that? What I ended up doing was buying a franchise business called Priority Management Systems. I bought that at the end of 1989. I went officially into business after franchisee training in Vancouver, Canada. I think 2 weeks, and after 2 weeks, I knew everything. Not really, but I'd learned a lot, and I really believed in the program. The company was called Priority Management Systems, as I mentioned. And what we did was we improved personal productivity. Of course, the the personal computer was introduced in 1981. And I was very computer literate, but not a lot of people were at that time. I had my first laptop in 1987. But we used the system was a book, like the Franklin Covey system. If you're in Utah, you've probably heard of the Franklin system, and you've heard of, I think it's Stephen Covey. There's a center named after him at BYU on the campus there. But essentially, we used a paper-based system, and I was thinking about that this morning because, and I've added some notes about that, because a couple of days ago, I was talking to a client, and we were talking about productivity and his startup business. And I told him about my experience with priority management, and I compared it to the Covey system, and he said, "Man, I sure do miss my Franklin Covey book," because he said I was so organized back then. And it got me to thinking that the first note I want to make is that, let me do the first slide. Basically, is personal productivity has a lot to do with where you are and what I call it, but what is called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And the reason that's important, Abraham Maslow was a psychologist who lived from, I think, 1902 to 1970. And he identified human needs based on a hierarchy, the lowest being physiological, or sometimes called survival needs, air, water, food, those kinds of things. And that if you're in that mode, psychologically or physically, where you're in danger or something is at great risk in your life, it's hard to be up the scale at worrying about your self-esteem or being self-actualized, because you're in a danger zone and you have to work your way out of it. So I want you to keep that in mind on a day-to-day basis, to think about where you are psychologically and what that allows you to do and achieve and accomplish. Because that's really critical. The lower you are on the scale, the more difficult it is to get the higher level things taken care of. Okay. But going back to and I want to read a couple of notes. And remember, this guy died in 1970. But the way he defined self-actualization was as achieving the fullest use of one's talents and interests, the need to become everything that one is capable of becoming. And he said that some people have characterized self-actualization as healthy narcissism. I thought that was a pretty classic line. And then he wrote, before 1970 and before social media, that self-actualizing individuals he studied had similar personality traits. All were reality-centered. They were able to differentiate between what was fraudulent from what was genuine. They were problem-centered. They treated life's difficulties as problems that demanded solutions. And those individuals also were comfortable being alone and had healthy personal relationships. This is the most classic line. They had only a few close friends and family rather than a large number of shallow relationships. Hello, social media. So that's my little sermon about Abraham Maslow. But the point I wanted to make on the board here, I'll move the stool out of the way, is that there are 4 pillars of personal organization. There's, of course, the calendar. There are your to-do lists. There's the projects you're working on or managing. And then communications that you're either have engaged with or you're going to engage with other people. That could be family, that could be friends. And the way the priority management of the Franklin Covey system was, obviously we had a paper calendar and you use that to manage appointments. Well, you do that electronically now. I don't know that the to-do list has evolved, although there are some software modules that allow you to do that. And that's important to keep track of those to-do lists and to check them off when you accomplish them. And then projects like the process management that we're going to talk about later is multifaceted and more complex. And sometimes there are flow charts involved and so forth. But the one that we saw the most benefit from in priority management was managing communications, because if the brain worked in a linear fashion, we would always be organized. We'd always be doing the right thing at the right time. But we think in random patterns. And so I might be doing a to-do item, and all of a sudden I think, when I see him again, I need to make a note to tell him this or ask him this. So we had a form that we used. It was called a communication planner, and we'd go to a contacts sheet. We had a sheet for each person in each company, and we'd write down, ask whatever or tell whatever. And then when that person called or we saw them, we'd say, hey, John, you know, when I saw you next, I realized I had to ask you and tell you a couple of things. And I'd go through my book to that page, and I'd go through that. Am I off the screen? Doesn't matter. So I would do that. And I was always on top of the things that I had to do and say to people. So what I suggest to you is, I'm not recommending a specific software program or package, but try to build a system that helps you manage these 4 pillars of personal effectiveness. You already have the calendar electronically. You probably can create a to-do list that is electronic and has built-in reminders. You certainly should have some sort of project sheet that you're keeping track of. And this is really critical, I think, because we have relationships with people in business and our personal lives, and this is one of the most effective pillars of the 4. Okay? So I hope that's helpful. Next slide is balance between your work and your personal life really even possible? And I suggest that it is, because I think once you control what's going on around you and you're dealing effectively with people, you're following through when you should, that takes a lot of the stress away. Just managing these 4 processes or pillars is critical. And if you can do that successfully, well, I did want to mention that this box on the table right here, I don't know if we'll take a break, but if we were to take a break, I want you to look in here, because in this box is the value of over $200,000. Okay? And we're going to cover how this value was created in a little while. We talk about process improvement. So when you work and prioritize and follow through and stay organized, you're allowing yourself to have a balanced life because you're going to have more time for yourself and your family, and you're going to be more effective in your work and in your relationships. So the second bullet there is prioritizing your time, and that's what we're talking about here. Because if you have 10 things to do today, I think you need to ask yourself at the beginning of the day, I have 10 things to do today. What is the one thing that if I could only accomplish one thing, it would be a good day? That's my number one priority. And then what's number two and what's number three and so on. And then how should you break up your time? I think, we've all heard about, I don't know what they call it, rhythms within the body or the brain. There's probably some terms there that I don't recall at the moment. But, personally, I'm very low productivity in the morning. I wake up groggy, grumpy. I just want my coffee. I want to be able to doodle or watch a YouTube video or, whatever, but not think about work. And so when I'm working through my day, I know that if I need to do something very productive, it's going to have to be later in the morning, early afternoon, even late afternoon. So figure out what your patterns are and then build your day around that. And you'll get more done and you'll be more productive if you do it that way. If you force yourself to work on something at 8:30 in the morning because it's your number one priority and you should get that done, but you're wasting time trying to work up the nerve and the energy to do it, then you're creating a lot of wasted energy. So I'm saying that, doing that number one priority thing and accomplishing it that day is very important, but I'm not saying that it has to be done first thing in the morning. If that's not your pattern, you shouldn't work that way, okay? And that's what I'm talking about in point number three. And then a very key point, and I see this with clients sometimes. I'll tell you about one I had in Texas a number of years ago. And the reason I bring up Texas is I worked for a small business development center in Fort Worth, Texas for a number of years and retired in 2015. And my wife retired later that year and we decided to move to Utah because our daughter and son-in-law lived here and we wanted to be near them. And after about 4 years of complete retirement, I got kind of bored. And so I came to see the director of the SBDC here and offered to either work part-time or cover yours, Bryce, or volunteer. And of course, that was in January of 2020. And we know what happened in the next 2 or 3 months and everything shut down and businesses started struggling. And then in June, Jim Herron, the director, called me and said, hey, we do need your help and we have the money to pay you. So I said, well, great. So I've been working in the Sandy SBDC since July of last year and really thoroughly enjoying it, working a couple or 3 days a week. Most of it from home, but becoming more and more office space. So back to the bullet number 4, the difference between self-inflicted failure and honest failure. What I mean by self-inflicted, I'll go back to my experience in Texas at the SBDC. I had a client who, it was ironically enough, a process improvement expert. And he was great at it, but he was terrible at business development. Well, he was a one-person shop. And so if he didn't develop new business, there was no new business. And so what I learned about him pretty quickly was that he would talk about how grandiose plans he had for the coming month and what he was going to do and accomplish. And then when I'd meet with him a month later, he hadn't done any of that stuff. So his business was not improving. So what I worked out with him was that he and I would meet either by phone or in person once a month. He would tell me his goals for the month, for the coming month. And then at the end of the beginning of the next month, we'd go over how did you do against those goals for the last 30 days. And believe me, when you're coming to see someone and telling them you failed and it was your fault, you end up doing more. You may not get it all done, but you feel that pressure. It's kind of like having a boss, even though he didn't work for me. He just didn't want to report failure. And my point about self-inflicted failure is if you set goals for yourself and then you don't do anything to achieve them, your failure is your own fault. It's self-inflicted, okay? And that's so key. Now, on the other hand, another experience I had in Texas When I owned my own business, which was Priority Management, I had a savings and loan company that I engaged with. And within a couple of months, I was training 60 people a month just at this one company. And we typically charged $395, or let's just say $400 for an individual student. But we discounted it because of the volume to $300. But imagine 60 clients a month, charging retail $300. Our cost of sales was less than $100. We're making $200 per person per month. Times 60 is $12,000 a month gross profit from one client. Man, I was rolling. That went on for a couple of years. And then the terrible thing happened. They were acquired by another company. And literally one day I had a two-wheeler with a bunch of our books on a two-wheeler. I was leaving my office, but then I could afford to have an office. And the phone rang just as the door was closing, so I set the two-wheeler down. I opened the door back up, answered my phone, and it was Steve Mortensen from the Savings and Loan, letting me know that not only did we not have a workshop tomorrow, but we never were going to have another one again. So that's honest failure. We did a great job for them. They loved it. Forces out of my hands and out of his hands changed the course of that relationship. And so I had to pick up the pieces. I'd gotten kind of fat and lazy, not literally fat, but I was making so much money, I wasn't doing business development like I should have been, because you always have to be planning for failure so that even when it does happen, you've already figured out a way to overcome it. And that's honest failure. Through no fault of your own, something went wrong, okay? So that's a real key thing. All right, so we see a lot of people working from home, which is great and awful at the same time. It's easy to get to work, but sometimes it's hard to shut it off, because when you're working in an office, you go to work at 8, you work through the day, maybe you work an hour late, and you go home at 6. But once you go home and you're in your car on the way, you're out of work mode again, and you're in family time. At home, one of the most critical things you have to do if you work from home is to set up a work structure around your schedule that says from this time to this time, I'm at work. When that time comes, maybe there's a little leeway there. I can maybe finish a few items up, and maybe it's a half hour past that time, but still cut it off, shut it down, go spend time with your friends or your family, okay? And that's real key. And then where you locate your workspace is real important. I've seen offices that, if you could find a place to put a sheet of paper where you could write a note that was legible on it, it would be a miracle. And you have to stay organized. You have to be focused on the one thing you're working on right now, and have the other things that might pop up in handy reach, but out of sight, kind of at an angle to you, where they're out of your peripheral vision. And so you have to set up your workspace for you to be productive. That's very important. Some people, their atmosphere is, where do I have music? Do I have fragrance? Those kinds of things. Now, personally, I don't like music when I'm working. I want my brain to be stimulated by whatever I'm working on. It could be my computer. It could be I'm jotting down some notes for a client meeting. It could be I'm writing notes for a client meeting I've had. It could be any number of things. But create an atmosphere that works for you, and that's different for everyone. And I always have your workspace clean and orderly. I say in my notes here, always have only one action item or folder on your active work surface. Other folders, to-dos that may pop up due to an email, a call, etc., have them neatly stacked and organized nearby, so you can access them easily, deal with them, and put them back where they were, so you can go back to the priority you were working on before the interruption. And that's really important. Okay? So those 4 points there, the intro to what I just talked about was, we're working from home a lot of the time, if not most of the time, or all the time. I mentioned the permanent workspace, setting work hours, and controlling your environment and workspace. Okay? So, do we go an hour or so? Okay. Okay, so, any questions about what we covered so far? So I want to talk about the real meat and potatoes of this.
You have a question right there.
Oh,
Just a comment on,
on the last slide?
yeah, on the last slide.
Okay.
That setting real work hours, something that we recommend for our employees where I work,
Okay,
especially those that are constantly working from home and are putting in a lot more hours than they should.
right.
To actually establish a time where you finish up work,
Are you able to monitor?
drive around the block.
Oh, really?
So that you can completely separate.
Yeah, yeah, I've heard that idea. I've heard that idea before.
And it,
You're commuting around the block,
Yeah.
you left work and then you went around the block and now you're home.
just so you have time to hang up work.
Yeah.
And so you can dedicate
Yeah.
time to what you need to in your personal life,
Yeah, that's an excellent thought.
to just have a real thing to transition.
Yeah.
Instead of one room to the next.
Yeah. That's a great idea. I like that. Okay, so let's talk about process improvement. A lot of people that own a small business, particularly ones that own a one-person shop, they think that they understand their processes so well that there's nothing that can be improved, okay? And some of the key points about process improvement, and I'm not an industrial engineer. I went to have a bachelor's degree in economics from UCLA and a master's in business from the University of Texas. So at one point for 2 years, my job title was industrial engineer because I was a part of a team that was planning a new manufacturing plant for Rockwell International, and the plant was going to be in a community north of Dallas, Texas. So I spent 2 years working on that team to lay out the plant, lay out conveying systems, parts distribution, and spent 2 years doing that. So, but I've always had a keen eye for inefficiencies. I don't know why that is. For example, I get up later than my wife, almost, I'd say 99 out of 100 mornings. And so I don't sleep in, but since I'm the last one to get up. Now, when I was single, I didn't care if I made the bed. I might make it 3 mornings a week. I might make it 2. I might make it 6. But it wasn't that really important to me. But I've been married to my wife 20 years, started this year 20 years. And early in our marriage, I realized that the bed being made was important to her. And she couldn't make it while I was in it, unless she was trying to smother me. So once I picked up on that, I thought, I'm just going to make the bed every morning because it pleases her and it takes me 3 or 4 minutes. But I'll be darned if I didn't figure out the process to make bed making more efficient. Where the pillows were, how many, I picked them both up at the same time, which side of the bed I started on. And I got to the point where I jokingly suggested to her that, honey, those gravel hauling trucks, they have that canvas that is spring loaded that covers so that the gravel won't fly out of the trailer. I said, what if I made one for our bed and I could just go like this and the bed would be made in the morning? I'm not going to say what she told me. I was only joking though. So you have to understand the process. You have to break each step down in the process, step by step, why that step is necessary. And if the step is necessary, look at ways to improve it. And I'm going to cover a case study, an actual case study that I worked on. And the reason that I say what's in this box is worth over $200,000 in counting is that it's not a client of mine, it's a friend of mine. We play tennis with and against each other. We play pickleball. And he has a window fashion installation business. When I met him in 2016, it was just him. And he was making about $60,000 a year, which is not bad, putting up window shades. You can't believe the money in a business like that. It's hard to believe, but anyhow. So I'm able to share details about that. If he was an SBDC client, I couldn't talk about him specifically or even mention numbers. But since he's just a friend and I asked his permission, I'm not going to tell you who he is or what his business name is or where he's located. That's not important. So every step that's necessary, look at ways to improve it. And then the second thing is, how much of each step in the process do you actually control? So for example, when I owned my franchise business, one of my goals was to improve the cycle where I got paid for, my invoices got paid. Well, I don't own that company that's my client. And I don't, the person who manages accounts payable doesn't work for me. So how the heck can I improve that? I don't have any control over it. Oh, not true at all. When I landed a new client company, one of the first things I did was I made it a point to meet the accounts payable manager. And I told him or her, I said, look, this is who I am, this is my business. These are the invoices that I'm going to generate and send to you. This is what they look like. I'd like to get paid quickly because these invoices are my paycheck. And I would always make the point, if I had to pay you and your paycheck depended on me paying you, and I paid you in 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 60 days, 90 days, how would you feel about that? And they'd always say, oh my God, that'd be awful. And I said, look, I'm just a fraction of a percent of your accounts payable dollars. Do you have a quick pay category that you could set me up in so that my invoices are paid quickly? It doesn't affect your company metrics of cash flow management because it's such a small part. Would you be willing to do that? And invariably they would. And I get paid within a week or two. In 6 years of owning that franchise and then selling it for a profit, I never wrote off $1 of accounts receivable, not one. Sometimes I drove all over town to figure out how to collect it, but it was important. Because when people didn't pay their bill that I sent them, they were stealing from me. And I just didn't want people stealing my money. Then the third point is, are there tools that you have access to or that you can develop that will improve efficiencies? And that's really what's in the box here. And that relates to the window treatment installation business. And then what value will you create or what benefit will you reap with improvements to your processes? And they could be financial and they could be psychological. So both are equally important, but if there's no value in doing that, then there's no reason to change your process, okay? And I want to talk about some business models very quickly. I don't know, how many of you ever eaten a Jimmy John's sandwich? Okay, how many of you have tried Jersey Mike's? Okay, and the heading at the top, that inefficiencies can actually be good if they're part of your business model. And what I mean by that is the next slide. Look at the process at Jersey Mike's, okay? They open up the store, somebody walks in, places an order. Whatever that order is, they make each sandwich individually. If you've ever been in a Jersey Mike's, it's so inefficient, it drives you crazy. They're standing there at the slicer. The guy or the lady reaches into the cooler, pulls out one type of meat, and maybe a sandwich has 5 different meats on it. They slice 3 or 4 slices, put it on the bread. Take that meat, put it back. Get the next one, put it on the slicer, put it on the bread. 5 times, and then there's cheese. They slice that, put it on the bread. That's so inefficient. Jimmy John's, they open the store at 10. They don't open the store. They go to work at 10 in the morning. They spend an hour building sandwiches, kits. The same meats that went on the Jersey Mike sandwich, they slice it all, put it in a stack in the shape of a bun, put the cheese on top, put a plastic layer on it, and build another one. They build another one. They build another one. They might build 10, 20 of the Italian, 10 or 20 of the ham and cheese. They're all in the cooler. You walk to the counter or the register, order a sandwich. You want an Italian, they reach in and get an Italian kit. They put it on the bread. How much more efficient is that? Why doesn't Jersey Mike's do that? Because Jersey Mike has more employees, more labor costs, but they charge more. And their outcome is, I don't know if you're familiar with food, not technology, but the food aroma. You know, like, for example, when you open a bottle of wine, you know, if you drink wine, you let the wine breathe, because air is important to the flavor of wine. Well, air is important to the flavor of food as well. And so what Jersey Mike's is doing, they're slicing everything fresh, when they put it on the sandwich, it's covered with air or oxygen, and that enhances the flavor. In Jimmy John's case, all that meat's pressed together. It's in a cool environment. When they pull it out, there's no aroma at all. You're probably thinking that I like Jersey Mike's better, and I do. But it's not because obviously the process is different. So, and what I kind of calculated or surmised from the two strategies, certainly that Jersey Mike's is much more inefficient, but they're able to charge a little bit more. And their motto is a sub above, which is kind of nonsensical because a sub is usually below. But I think they mean a submarine sandwich is above the other submarine sandwiches. But the subliminal message from this process is we care about every sandwich ordered and we make it fresh for you. Jimmy John's, their motto is freaky fast. They create the image that you're going to come in, you order, before you've even paid for the sandwich, it's already wrapped and ready to go. So their subliminal message is, we know your time is valuable, so we make a great sandwich and get you on your way. So they're both right. They're just different, very different. And for someone looking for efficiencies, Jersey Mike's a crazy zone. Okay, so I already covered the process. Oh, no, that was the previous slide one. Okay. All right, so the next question, the next slide is, can a relatively simple business double its income through improving efficiencies? And I think I proved that it can in this particular case. Because a business like a window fashion installation, they charge by the piece, not by the hour, because they're independent contractors. So the more units they can put up in an hour or a day, the more money they're going to make. Very important. So this particular business, again, it's not an SBDC client, it's a friend of mine. He's a one-owner LLC in Utah County, although he does work in other counties as well. And the process that he uses, or should use, is they work for retailers, okay? So like you'll have an independent shop that has a showroom, they show blinds, shutters, draperies, roller shades, cell shades, et cetera, all the different products. And potential customers go in there and they look at what's available, what colors are available, what fabrics. They ask for pricing, which they can't get pricing when they just walk in the showroom because the pricing depends on the square area of a shade or a blind or a shutter. So that retailer, the client says, well, I would like a quote on my home. And so that retailer will call an independent installer and say, hey, Joe, I have this prospective customer that wants pricing on these items. So would you go to their home and measure their windows and then turn that sheet into me and I'll be able to price it out, okay? So then the independent installer gets paid for that, typically about $100, just to go out and do the measurements. If it's a huge home, like if you've ever been in a home in the Daybreak area, those homes have 50, 60 windows and doors. A typical home has 15 to 20, maybe 25. So they're going to charge $200 for that measure in the Daybreak because it's so huge. It takes so much time. So that independent person schedules an appointment. They go to their home or their business sometimes. Now, just because they did the measurement doesn't mean that a product is going to be sold. Customer may decide the price is too high. They may go to a cheaper route. But the installer still gets paid for the measurement, okay? So if the customer didn't order a product, they bill a retailer for the measurement work. If they do order, then almost always that installer will get that that measuring person will get that installation done, okay? So once that product comes in, the retailer lets the installer know, and the installer makes an appointment to do the installation. Then the day before, typically, or that morning, they'll go to the warehouse or the storage room where the product is, pick it up, haul it over to the customer location, unload it, unpack it, stage it, put each product in the room that it's going to be installed in. Then when they're done, they're going to clean up, they're going to pack up their vehicle, and they're going to get the customer to sign out that the installation was done properly. And then when that's all done, they'll create an invoice and send it to the retailer. Then the cycle starts all over again. Okay? So a pretty simple process. And if you think there's not money in it, here's the last page of an invoice that I'm very familiar with, because this is my home. My wife and I moved into a new home in June, and we had window shades or window fashion products and draperies made and installed. And I'm ashamed to say we spent almost $19,000, which is not these things are expensive, yeah, expensive. And partly because I have 20 windows in my home. Half of them had both window shades, roller shades, and drapes as well. And drapes are super expensive, and the labor prices is pretty astronomical. So the installation fee was $1,200. And that was less than one day's work. But I already spent $16,000, $17,000. What's another $1,200, right? So I didn't balk at it because my friend I've seen the process. So if a person can do that amount of work in less than a day or even a full day, $1,200 a day is pretty darn good money, right? Now some installers hate draperies because they're much more labor intensive to install and much more precise. If you make a mistake, the fabric, if you have a greasy thumbprint, then you get it on the fabric and you have to replace the whole drape. You're talking about maybe thousands of dollars, depending on the size. So the money's there. So if you break the process down into 5 steps, well, the scheduling. So my friend, his name's Jorge, we talked about scheduling. I said, how do you schedule? I said, I want to call the customer, and I ask them when they're available, and then I set up an appointment and I go. I said, Jorge, what if you have a customer that wants to see you on Monday morning in Orem, and then you've asked another customer and they want to see you in Bountiful in the afternoon, and then you do that every day, you're driving 60 miles extra and wasting probably an hour to 2 hours a day just driving. The only time you're making money is when you're installing. That's the only time. Every unit you put up is another certain amount of dollars in your account. And the less time you waste, the more money you'll have to be billing and installing and billing. And so don't let the customer control your schedule. You decide, I've got 10 installations this coming week, and lay that out on a map and create your route. Because I know that if I have a product coming that needs to be installed in my home, I'm going to work around your schedule. If you tell me I'll be in your area, you ever heard that from a delivery person or an installer? I'll be in your area Tuesday in the afternoon. I'd like to come by and install the product. You're going to bend over backwards to make that happen. So by controlling the schedule, he's eliminating a lot of wasted time. Because he's not making any money scheduling. And then I'll show you this is a typical installer toolkit. It's a bag with that screw you carry on your belt, and then this, you just hook it to your pocket so you don't have to put it down anywhere. You're going zip, 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 zip. Using this drill, 1/4-inch hex screws. That's 90% of the toolkit for an installer. Okay. Of course, you need a pencil, and you need a tape. Okay. So let's say that go over here. Just a visual. So a typical window opening is, I'm not an artist, so let's just say that it's about, if you're looking at it from the side, that it's 4 inches, about 4 inches, 4 inches, 4 inches, and then the bracket's going to be put up in this area right here. If it's a real wide window, there's going to be a center bracket put up right here, and then another bracket right here. Okay, so real simple. It's too simple that you would think that you could improve the process. So let's say I'm measuring a home, and there's a big window, maybe 7 feet across. So that tape's not gonna snap, but you think that's gonna be an accurate measure? I don't think so. And if you don't have a helper to hold the other end, it's kind of hard to get an accurate measure. So when you're doing a measure, you measure the width of a window 3 times. You know why that is? Like a door is a door. 32-inch door is always going to be 32 inches wide. If it has a glass panel, the panel for that model door is always going to be the exact same width and height. But when you build a home, the windows are a precise dimension as well. But the surround for the window is not. Because a stud may be warped a little bit in the middle. The sheetrock or texturer may put an extra dollop on the inside of the window frame. So there's an 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 inch difference between the width at the top, the width at the middle, and the width at the bottom. And the problem is if you only measure the top and the middle is narrower, guess what? You lower the shade and it gets stuck in the middle and won't go all the way down. So you measure 3 times. Once at the top, once in the middle, once at the bottom, and you order the smallest dimension on the width. Now, so if I have a home in Daybreak and there's 50 windows, I've got to measure 150 widths. And I've got to measure 50 heights because the height is just one measurement. Okay? But if I'm doing this and writing it down, it's very inefficient, and it's not that accurate. Believe you saw the tape bend. So what if I had a tool? See if I have a tool that might make that better. Yes. Here we go. So let's say that that this is. Would you do me a favor? Would you hold this tape just like you're sticking out? Yeah. Right there. So what if I do this? That's 8 feet, 4 inches, 4 3/16 inches. It's precise, it's quick. Thanks. I do that 3 times. I don't have to have a person to hold the tape because the side of the other side of the window frame is going to do that for me. So I measure it 3 times and I write down the smallest dimension. The height, I do the same thing. I put it in the windowsill, shine it up there. That's 5 feet. No, 5 feet 8 inches. So that's a productivity tool right there. Quicker, much more accurate. Okay. So the measuring, you've made it more efficient, get more done, and more accurate. And the importance of accuracy is that if the installer measurer measures wrong and the product won't fit, he has to eat the cost of that. So your $1,200 installation fee, when you lost, you're going to pay the wholesale cost, obviously, but let's say the product you mismeasured and doesn't fit was $200. Now you've only got $1,000 of income because you had to eat $200. So that's why precision is so important. All right, so that's the measuring part. Now the installing part, this is really wonderful. So I've got a window and I've got brackets, I've got screws, hex head screws, I'm going to put the bracket, but sometimes the product has to be spaced away from the window or away from the front of the window frame, either by customer choice or because the operation of the product would rub on the window otherwise. So what if you had to do, let's say 3/4 inch spacing? And what you're going to do is you're going to, every window, you're going to go to the window 3 times. You're going to say, okay, 1/2 inch, I'm going to make a mark right here on the sheetrock. 1/2 inch, I'm going to make a mark on the sheetrock. 1/2 inch, I'm going to make a mark on the sheetrock. And then when I install it, I've got to hold that bracket and find that line again and hold it while I'm trying to screw things in. Sometimes your hand moves and you ruin it. So if there were a way to control the distance and the precision, that would be pretty cool, right? What do you think?
Yeah.
You think?
Get a spacer.
How about you back there? You think so? Okay.
Yeah, I use that Bosch laser measure
Do you?
all the time. I love it.
Yeah, they're only like $40.
Yeah, $40 on
Yeah.
Amazon.
So I don't have any actual brackets, but so typically the spacing is going to be 1/2 inch 1 inch, ½ inch, 3/4, 1, and 1.5. Okay. So what if you had a way where you didn't have to make all those marks and then find them again, and then position it and just pop the bracket up there? Well, there is such a tool. Here's my original prototypes. ½ inch magnet, 1 inch magnet, 1.5, 3/4 magnet, 1.5 magnet. So now, where's my piece of metal here? I don't have an actual bracket. So let's say that it's 3/4 and I'm inside the window frame. I'm sorry, 3/4. I have to space it away from the window. This is the window frame right here. You simply pop it right there. This typically is going to be a box like this. You know, you'd be screwing into the side of the window frame. And see, that's perfect positioning. I do zip, zip, have a center zip, zip, and I have a third one, zip, zip. Instead of measuring, marking, finding the mark, holding the product in place. And I actually, I made these myself. They're kind of rough, but they worked. I just wanted to prove that they worked. So Jorge has, made some fancier ones. He's hired some other installers because he can manage a business now because he has more time to do that. And the newer ones are more sleek, I guess. I actually had these 3D printed, and I thought about filing a patent for them, and I just never did. I don't know. Maybe you can advise me on that, Bryce.
Yeah.
But these work. I mean, just imagine how quickly you just throw on a piece of metal and it's sticking, you're popping it in the corner and going 2 screws, the next one, 2 screws, 2 screws. So a home with 50 shades or blinds using the tape measure method and some other efficiencies that we're going to have at the end, you're going to spend a day and a half to 2 days doing that. 50 windows and door home now with these tools. You can do that in a day. In a day, or a little bit less. And the way you do it a little bit less was one of the things that I went on some big jobs with Jorge. One was a home in Daybreak. I think it had 55 windows and doors. And we also did I didn't spend the whole day with him. I went to where he was doing an install at a nursing home. I think it had 250 windows. And he used these tools to do it. And the home in Daybreak, he got done in less than 8 hours. And part of that was he also had some other inefficiencies that I showed him how to overcome. When you go to do an installation, the packaging is outrageous. You've got boxes, you've got bubble wrap, you've got foam wrap, you've got tape. Unpacking all that and then staging it is critical. And it takes a lot of time. And like I said, the only time you're making money is right here. If you're doing measuring, you're making a little bit. But when you're unwrapping boxes and carrying the individual products into the individual rooms and putting them in the individual windows, you're not making any money. So what we suggested, and he's now doing, is when he has a big job, he contracts with a day labor firm, and they send somebody out, and when he gets to the job site, that person's waiting to unload, and he'll unwrap the first couple of products so that he can install them, and while he's doing that, the person's unpacking and staging the product for him, and all the peripheral stuff, the brackets, the screws, the balance clips, the balances, the blinds, etc. So he's always installing and the small jobs he's going to do himself because it just takes a few minutes. So it's really important to identify the areas that are inefficient and then identify how to work around them to create more revenue in this case. Because again, this is where the dollars are. A little bit here, 90% of his income is from here. And it's important to break that down and to show. And so I think you can see that how these items would be helpful, right? If you can, I don't know what to tell you. So yeah, that's my. So what's been the impact? Oh, and by the way, I don't want you to think of a window fashion installer as a laborer, because they're part of the knowledge worker class now. So in our home, we have a couple windows where we have remote controlled shades. And ours are pretty simple. You just use the remote and up or down. We have one that goes down at the top or up from the bottom, or either way. But imagine a home that has a room on the corner of the house. And in that room, there's 3 windows on this wall, 3 windows on this wall, 3 windows on this wall. So 6 windows, and they're all remote controlled. Jorge has to set up 9 programs. One program raises and lowers all 6. Two programs raises one side of that room, all 3 at once, and then the other program, all 3 on the other side. And then the individual windows, 1 for each window. So 9 different programs. So they're becoming part of the knowledge worker class. And because of that, they're seeing a lot of technology introduced. And as you can imagine, they can charge more the more technology they're having to learn and implement. Okay? Okay, so the last thing, this is really fun, I think. Any questions so far? Have we had any questions? So like I said, the basic business, very simple, see, on the face of it, but there are a lot of ways it can be complicated. But then if you drill down deeper, you can simplify it, and you can make more money in this case. And brand selection also affects productivity. You wouldn't think so. You think a window blind is a window blind is a window blind. Au contraire. So look at the 2 high-level brands. Hunter Douglas, you probably heard of it. Really top-notch quality, top-notch pricing, by the way. And then Graber's a really nice national brand as well. And the difference there is you think, well, what if I bought a blind from Graber versus bought a blind from Hunter Douglas? Well, one blind's not going to make a huge difference. But what if you bought 50? With Hunter Douglas, you get packaging that is so complex, and so the minutia is just astounding. So for example, 50 windows and doors in a home or a building, you're going to get 50 window coverage, right? You're going to get 50 sets of brackets. You're going to get 50 sets of screws. You're going to get 50 sets of balance clips. You're going to get 50 balances. But most Graber packs all those peripheral items into one package. You've got all 50 brackets in one bag. You open the bag and put it in a bucket, and then you carry that bucket around to make the installation. Or the material handler places them in the window where the product is staged. Hunter Douglas, you're going to get 50 bags of brackets. In each box, there'll be 2 brackets, 3 brackets, and every box has brackets in it. And they're wrapped in plastic or in a box. So with a Hunter Douglas order in a home with 50 windows, you're opening 50 bags of brackets, 50 plastic envelopes containing screws, and 50 plastic bags containing balance clips. And you've got to cut every one of those bags and open up every one of those boxes. That takes a lot of time. And I think what Hunter Douglas is doing is they're using the Jersey Mike model, where they're showing the quality of their product to the customer, and by doing all this individual wrapping in this real nice packaging. The problem is the customer doesn't even see that. When the installer gets to their home, they go in the den and watch TV, and the installer's cursing and opening bags. So what Jorge learned from this was that if I have to do this kind of work, I'm going to charge more, and I have a reason why I can justify it. If I'm going to do work with this product, I can charge less. And if I don't charge more for these guys, then I'm going to make less money if I don't raise my pricing. So the product selection oftentimes has an impact on productivity. So let's get to the bottom. Where are we in time?
Yeah.
9:54.
Okay. So here's the cumulative effect. When I met Jorge in 2016, probably around September, October maybe, we got to know each other, became friends, and he was complaining about, he had a new child at the time, and that money was tight. He's working as hard as he could, and he's making about $60,000 a year. These are round numbers, but this was before we introduced efficiencies. By becoming more productive, scheduling better, getting more productive, charging more for more difficult product installations, his income went up to $100,000 in 2017. And he hadn't fully implemented them. And then at some point, mid 2018, he brought in another installer, part-timer, 1099, and was able to increase his income another $20,000. And then he has that one installer working full-time and another part-timer in 2019. This is I don't know if you're familiar with the Schedule C, line 31, net profit from business. That's the number we're looking at. 175,000. Who thought an installer could make that kind of money? Now he's 2020 was a down year for the first half, but once the home market took off, then his business took off too. So now he's got 3 installers working for him. And he's not, most of the time he's not installing products. But they have the same tools that he does, these magic little magnet holders, and these other, the laser measurer and all that sort of stuff. And because he's making a lot more money.
So you actually met with him and just like pointed out these inefficiencies?
Yeah, I actually went to work with him a couple times.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was as a friend.
That's awesome.
And I go visit clients all the time, as much as I can, because I love seeing their business, seeing how they're doing things. I've got a client that opened she rented warehouse space, and now she's opening up a retail store just off Temple Street in Salt Lake. And she's in the women's beauty products that she manufactures those herself. Well, she has employees, but I've helped her set up her warehouse for order packing flow and stuff like that. Yeah, so it's a lot of fun. So I hope you see that even simple businesses can be analyzed and improved, and that time is money, and the more time you create for yourself and in terms of productivity, then the more money you're going to make. And at worst case, you'll just be less stressed. So I hope that this has been helpful for you, and thank you for having me. Yes, sir.
Do you, on your 4 pillars there that you wrote down?
Yeah.
Do you have a project sheet that you've utilized over the years that helps you manage sheets that you really love?
I don't have a specific one. Would you write down your email, and I'll do a little research and try to find one for you.
You don't have to.
No, I don't mind doing it.
Okay.
Yeah. Now you made me curious. Darn you.
All right.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Jim.
Sure.
Appreciate it. You're downstairs and all as well. So, thank you guys for coming to Bagels. Just a reminder, next Wednesday, Lunch and Learn for Meal clients here at noon. We're actually going to take a deep dive into processes. Particularly going to focus on the kind of the post-pandemic. I think we all are aware that it's taken a little bit longer to what we thought was normal to get back into there. And so we're going to spend an hour kind of rolling up our sleeves and going through. We're going to start with marketing, go through our marketing process and make sure that that we are prepared for maybe a longer stay in the pandemic and start to identify marketing weaknesses that we can address. So that's next week here at noon. Monique will be sending out a reminder on Thursday or Friday. But anyways, thanks for being here, and we will see you next week.